Welcome to the Hindu Daily. We're jumping right into the core of today's sources, pulling out the key insights for you. And we start today with a pretty critical development in global health. We're talking about the fight against malaria.
That's right. And it's a complex picture. I mean, India's seen great success reducing cases, but globally, still looking at nearly 600,000 deaths last year, mostly in Africa. And, the fact we haven't achieved full eradication, especially in these persistent areas, like parts of Odisha, Chhattisgarh in India, it's really forcing researchers to look at new tools.
Yeah, a shift away from just the external things like nets and spraying
Right.
towards something called insecticides.
Exactly. Insecticides. It's a powerful idea, really. Insecticides that work from inside the human body.
Okay, inside the body. How does that work?
Well, the drug getting the most attention is ivermectin. Now, we know it for treating parasites, things like that. But the key insight here is its effect on mosquitoes. It stays in the human bloodstream long enough so that when a mosquito bites someone who's been treated.
Ah, the mosquito gets a dose too.
Precisely. It's lethal to the mosquito, or at least it significantly shortens its lifespan, enough that it likely can't transmit malaria anymore.
Okay, so that's the theory. And that led to these Bohemia trials.
Yes. And the results from the Kenya trial, which were just published in the New England Journal of Medicine, they're quite striking. Even in an area with really high bed net use already, Kwale County, they saw malaria cases drop by 26% in the group that got ivermectin.
26%. That sounds substantial.
It is. It's actually above the threshold the WHO uses to say, okay, this intervention has public health value. And the safety profile looked good, too. They gave out 56,000 doses, only mild side effects reported. Though it's important to note, they excluded pregnant women and children under 15 kilos.
And the advantage here is it gets around mosquitoes adapting, right? Like biting outdoors or earlier in the evening when people aren't under nets.
Exactly. That's a huge plus. Mosquitoes are evolving, finding ways around our current tools. Ivermectin targets the mosquito vector whenever and wherever it bites a treated person. It complements the nets and spraying.
And there's that interesting side note in the source about bedbugs.
Oh, right. Yeah, the team in Kenya noticed a really dramatic drop in bedbugs in the treated areas, so a potential collateral benefit, which is always welcome in public health.
Okay, so promising results in Kenya, but it's not a magic bullet everywhere yet.
No, definitely not. And we need to be clear about the caveats. The sister trial in Mozambique, well, it got disrupted by a cyclone, so the data is messy. And another big trial, the Maternal trial in Guinea-Bissau, actually showed no benefit.
No benefit. Why the difference?
It likely comes down to dosing and timing. Getting those details exactly right seems absolutely critical for this to work effectively. It highlights that, implementation isn't straightforward.
Which brings us to maybe the elephant in the room. Resistance. Ivermectin is used a lot in animals, isn't it?
It is, and that's the central looming concern here. We've already seen resistance develop in things like ticks on livestock because of overuse. Now, resistance in humans taking the drug is rare, but we have almost no data on what happens when you deploy this widely against Anopheles mosquitoes, the ones that carry malaria.
So we could inadvertently create resistant mosquitoes.
That's the fear. The sources really stress this. We absolutely need rigorous surveillance, not just tracking malaria cases, but monitoring the drug's impact on the mosquitoes themselves and other non-target organisms, too. We need to be careful not to accelerate resistance, which could undermine everything.
A powerful potential tool, then, but one that needs very careful handling. Okay, let's shift gears now. We're moving from medical science to constitutional demands, specifically in Ladakh.
Right. This involves the protests led by the Leh Apex Body, or LE, and the Kargil Democratic Alliance, KDA. Sonam Wangchuk's hunger strike really brought this into the national spotlight.
And this all stems back to 2019, the change in Article 370 status.
Exactly. Ladakh became a union territory, but crucially, without its own legislative assembly. And that lack of local legislative power is, well, it's at the heart of the current demands.
The core fear being loss of control.
It's pretty existential for them, yes. Given Ladakh's unique culture, environment, and relatively small population, there's a deep worry about losing control over land and jobs, potentially to big businesses or outside interests coming in.
So what are they actually asking for? The source lists 4 main demands.
Yes, 4 key points. First, inclusion in the 6th schedule of the Constitution. This gives special protections to tribal areas, particularly around land rights and local governance. Second, they want full statehood for Ladakh.
Okay. 6th schedule statehood. What else?
Third, separate Lok Sabha seats for Leh and Kargil, reflecting the distinct regions. And fourth, a practical one, filling the large number of vacant government positions which impacts local employment and services.
Now, the government has responded, saying they've already achieved, quote, phenomenal results through recent actions.
That's the counter-narrative, yes. The Ministry of Home Affairs points to several administrative changes they've made. They highlight increasing the scheduled tribe reservation in government jobs quite significantly, from 45% up to 84% for locals.
84%. That's a big jump.
It is. They also mention mandating a one-third reservation for women in the local hill councils and declaring Bodhi and Purji as official languages. They frame these as major steps towards socioeconomic development and addressing local concerns.
But for the protest groups, LA and KDA, these administrative steps, they don't go far enough.
That's the crux of the disagreement. The groups argue that while those measures are welcome, they don't provide the core constitutional safeguards they're seeking. The big demands, statehood and sixth schedule status, remain unmet.
So it's a standoff over the type of protection. Administrative rules versus constitutional guarantees.
Pretty much. The groups want that guaranteed self-determination, especially over land and political representation, which they feel only constitutional status, like the sixth schedule or statehood, can truly provide. It's about long-term security.
Okay, a complex situation there. Let's move from constitutional debates within India to a major global policy shift, this time in U.S. immigration, specifically the H-1B visa. There was a huge reaction to that fee hike.
Huge is right. Shocked the tech world, really. The fee for certain new H-1B applications was increased. Well, by about 60 times, landing at $100,000.
$100,000, just for the application fee.
For some categories, yes. A staggering amount. The stated goal from the White House is to curb abuses of the program, protect American workers from being displaced, and also safeguard national security.
So the administration clearly feels the system is being misused. Companies hiring foreign workers cheaper than Americans.
That's the allegation, yes, that companies use it to hire foreign STEM talent at a, quote, significant discount, undermining U.S. graduates.
But there's another side to that argument, isn't there? About H-1B workers actually complementing the U.S. workforce.
There is. And you see this in economic studies like the one by Daniel Ayobdia mentioned in the source. It suggests H-1B workers often fill very specialized roles or maybe less desirable jobs, acting as a complement, not just a substitute. And we should note the scale here, India is by far the biggest beneficiary, getting something like 71% of H-1B approvals this year.
Still, those allegations of exploitation and displacement are serious. The source mentions a 2017 study suggesting U.S. computer scientists might have had higher wages without the current system.
Yes, though that same study also noted potential consumer benefits from, potentially lower costs passed on. It really shows the tension inherent in the program. And it's not just about wages.
What else?
Well, there have been allegations of discrimination within the program's use. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, has investigated big IT firms like TCS and Cognizant over claims they discriminated against non-South Asian workers in favor of H-1B hires from South Asia. That adds another layer of complexity and pressure for reform.
So this massive fee hike, what does it mean practically?
Well, for many companies, especially smaller ones or startups, $100,000 per hire is it's financially impossible. It effectively restricts H-1B use to maybe the very top-tier STEM graduates going to the biggest companies. But there's a really important detail.
Oh, what's that?
There's a clause, described as little known, that allows for a waiver of this huge fee if the applicant is working on a project deemed of national importance.
National importance. That sounds potentially broad.
It could be. How that gets interpreted will be key. It suggests the door isn't completely slammed shut, but it creates a very specific, potentially discretionary pathway.
And you'd expect legal challenges to this fee.
Oh, absolutely. Immigration lawyers are almost certainly preparing lawsuits. The core argument will likely be that government agency fees are supposed to be reasonably related to the cost of providing the service.
And $100,000 to process a visa application doesn't sound reasonably related to costs.
Exactly. It seems punitive or designed to deter rather than cover administrative expenses. So its legal basis is definitely going to be tested in court. It's far from over.
Right. A legal battle brewing there. Now, let's shift from the legal battlefield to, well, a digital one. There's a recent investigation revealing some pretty large-scale surveillance by Israel's military intelligence, Unit 8200, using Microsoft's Azure cloud.
Yeah, this is a fascinating and maybe concerning look at how military intelligence is leveraging big tech infrastructure. Unit 8200, which is sort of like Israel's NSA, reportedly migrated millions of intercepted Palestinian phone calls and audio recordings onto Microsoft's Azure cloud platform.
Millions of calls. Why use Azure? Why not their own systems?
Scale, that seems to be the main reason. Their existing on-premises servers apparently had limits. They could maybe handle calls from tens of thousands of people. Moving to Azure gave them essentially infinite storage. It let them massively scale up their surveillance capabilities, from analyzing thousands of calls a day to potentially millions.
So it wasn't just storing the calls, but analyzing them too.
Precisely. That's the other key part. The report suggests Microsoft and Israeli military engineers worked together to build a specific, segregated system on Azure. This used Azure's computing power and, crucially, multimodal AI tools.
AI tools for what?
For automatically transcribing the calls, translating them from Arabic to Hebrew, and then analyzing the content, turning all that raw voice data into searchable text, creating this vast, searchable repository of Palestinian conversations.
And the reason they can intercept so many calls in the first place is infrastructure.
Yes. The source points out that Israel effectively controls the Palestinian telecommunications infrastructure. Almost all calls and data have to pass through switches controlled by Israel, making mass interception technically feasible.
What was Microsoft's response to this investigation?
Initially, they denied the report's findings. However, after conducting their own internal review, they apparently found evidence supporting the claims. Microsoft then announced they had, quote, ceased and disabled a set of services that were being provided to that specific Israeli defense unit involved.
So Microsoft pulled back. Does that mean this kind of surveillance stops?
Likely not, and this is a crucial point from the source material. Unit 8200 isn't solely reliant on Azure. They have a broader cloud strategy, most notably through something called Project Nimbus.
Project Nimbus, what's that?
It's a huge $1.2 billion contract that Israel has with both Amazon Web Services, AWS, and Google Cloud. They also work with data analytics firms like Palantir. So cutting off specific Azure services might just mean they shift those workloads to AWS or Google Cloud.
So it highlights how deeply embedded these major U.S. tech companies are in these sensitive geopolitical situations.
Absolutely. It shows that military and intelligence agencies are strategically diversifying their cloud providers, making it harder to disrupt their operations by targeting just one company.
Okay, let's pivot now to a different kind of conflict, perhaps a cultural one. There's this narrative trying to link acetaminophen use during pregnancy with autism.
Yes, and this is a really important issue to unpack carefully. The source describes this as a political narrative, almost like finding a new scapegoat after the vaccine controversies. It attempts to frame autism not as a complex neurodevelopmental condition, but as a preventable harm caused by mothers taking a common painkiller during pregnancy.
Pinning the blame on imputed maternal failings, as the source puts it.
Exactly. It's rhetorically effective because it simplifies a complex issue and assigns blame to individual choice, specifically maternal choice, rather than grappling with genetics or wider environmental factors.
But what does the actual science say? Is there a link?
Well, the consensus among major health bodies like the WHO and obstetric groups is pretty clear. They maintain that acetaminophen is appropriate and considered safe during pregnancy when it's medically needed, and crucially, used at the lowest effective dose for the shortest possible time.
Okay, so medically indicated use is okay. But where did the idea of a link come from?
It came from some earlier observational studies. These studies did find a statistical association between mothers reporting acetaminophen use and later autism diagnoses in their children. However, and this is key, these studies themselves acknowledged they were very vulnerable to confounding factors.
Confounding factors, like what?
Like the reason the mother took the drug in the first place. Was she treating a fever? A severe infection? Those underlying conditions could themselves be related to neurodevelopmental outcomes, completely separate from the drug used to treat the symptoms. You can't easily untangle that in simple observational studies.
So the illness, not the medicine, might be the issue. Is there stronger evidence?
Yes, and this is the critical rebuttal. A large recent study from Sweden, published in 2024, used a much more rigorous design. They looked at matched siblings.
Matched siblings. How does that help?
It helps control for a huge number of genetic and family environmental factors that could confound results. They compared children whose mothers used acetaminophen during that pregnancy with their siblings born from pregnancies where the mother didn't use it.
And what did they find?
When they did the sibling comparison, the small risks that had appeared in the simpler studies, they disappeared, vanished completely. This provides a really strong piece of evidence against a causal link.
That's a powerful finding. But the source also reminds us acetaminophen isn't risk-free in general.
Absolutely not, and that's vital context. It is the leading cause of acute liver failure in the U.S., mostly due to accidental overdose. So awareness about correct dosage, not exceeding the maximum daily limit, is incredibly important for everyone, pregnant or not.
So the takeaway is, be careful with dosage, but don't avoid necessary medical treatment during pregnancy out of unfounded fear about autism.
Precisely. Public health messages need to be accurate and avoid trading in fear or blaming mothers based on weak evidence. Acetaminophen is a tool that needs respect and careful use, but linking it causally to autism based on current strong evidence seems unwarranted. Autism is complex, and we don't help anyone by promoting simplistic blaming narratives.
A really important clarification there. Okay, let's move from health debates to something quite exciting. The transformation in Indian women's cricket. The source pinpoints a specific moment as a turning point.
Yes, July 20th, 2017. Harmanpreet Kaur's incredible innings, 171 runs against Australia in the World Cup semi-final. The source argues that this was the moment Indian audiences really started seeing women's cricket simply as cricket, high-quality, thrilling sport, not a separate, lesser category.
It changed the perception, gave it visibility.
Exactly. It created role models and generated excitement that really fueled the next generation, and that generation is emerging now.
And the source highlights the geography of these new players as significant.
Very significant. It points to players like Uma Chetri, the first woman from the Northeast from Assam to debut for India, Kranti Good from a village in Madhya Pradesh, noted for her speed, and Sri Charani from Andhra Pradesh, who was just player of the series against England U23s.
So it's not just Mumbai or Delhi anymore.
No. It signals the game breaking out of its traditional metropolitan centers. Talent is coming from Tier 2, Tier 3 towns, smaller places. The talent pool is getting much, much deeper.
And this is a world away from what the previous generation experienced, like Goswami and Raj.
Completely different. The source contrasts their careers starkly. Legends like Hulan Goswami and Mithali Raj played much of their careers before women's cricket was fully integrated under the BCCI. They often relied on family money, sacrificing a lot, playing purely for passion with minimal financial reward or recognition. Remember that story about the $9,000 check for being World Cup runners-up in 2005?
Right, barely anything. So what changed things financially? Was it just the BCCI integration?
Integration helped, but the real game changer, according to the source, was the Women's Premier League, WPL, launched in 2023.
The WPL, how did that change things?
Fundamentally, it provided institutional structure, sure, but critically, it brought financial security. Suddenly, even uncapped domestic players could earn life-changing sums of money through the auctions. As Mithali Raj is quoted, cricket went from being a gamble for families to a viable, potentially lucrative career path.
And that financial security breeds confidence.
Absolutely. The source describes the current generation as fearless. They have the financial backing, the high-level competition in the WPL, the visibility. It allows them to play with more freedom and confidence, even under pressure.
And you see this impacting families, too. The source mentions mothers playing a key role.
Yes, stories like Uma Chetri's mother or Kranti Good's mother selling jewelry to support her daughter's training. But now it's not just sacrifice, it's seen as an investment. Parents are proactively encouraging their daughters, breaking old patterns because they see cricket as a genuine professional future. That shift in parental mindset is huge.
A real social transformation alongside the sporting one. Okay, moving from the cricket pitch to a different kind of space. A new sanctuary for Indian handicrafts in Delhi called the Kunj.
Yes, this sounds like quite an ambitious project. A large new sandstone building in Vasant Kunj, which is interesting because it's right next to all the swanky modern shopping malls built by the Ministry of Textiles.
And the tagline is, handmade in India, crafted for the world. So the aim is to elevate traditional crafts.
Seems so. The curatorial approach sounds interesting too. It's not just a massive shop. They're apparently focusing on bringing in brands and craft collectives like Iro or Khmer that work with traditional techniques but maybe push design boundaries, and importantly, ones that don't already have their own big retail spaces.
So giving a platform to innovative craftspeople and fostering connections.
Right. The idea is to create conversations between different regional styles, like you might see Udaipur block printing next to Odisha Ikat. And the philosophy behind it is described as Kala Asavan, which means art appreciation rather than just aggressive selling.
Art appreciation over hard sell. Does the space itself reflect that?
Apparently so. The source mentions details like arabesque scrolls in mosaic work, Chetnod-style pillars, design elements meant to encourage aesthetic engagement, slow appreciation. But perhaps the most significant part is a specific hall called Karagar Sangam.
Karagar Sangam, what happens there?
This is where they showcase and sell high-end pieces, objets
Mm.
d'art made by award-winning master artisans, and the crucial detail here is the financial arrangement.
How so?
The prices for these pieces are set entirely by the artisans themselves, and, according to the source, 100% of the proceeds go directly back to the artisan. No government cut, no institutional commission.
Wow, all proceeds direct to the maker. That's quite rare.
It really is. It directly empowers the caregiver. The source gives an example of being able to buy traditional printing blocks directly from a Shilp guru, Khandra Gangadhar, in that space. It fosters a direct connection.
So the potential is there to attract people who genuinely value the craft itself, not just looking for a quick souvenir. Students, designers.
Exactly. People who want to understand the process, appreciate the skill, maybe without the pressure of a typical retail environment. It could be a really valuable space for preserving and promoting these traditions in a sustainable way.
A different kind of revolution now focusing on community empowerment through Karnataka's rural libraries. This initiative, led by IAS officer Uma Mahadevan Dasgupta, sounds remarkable.
It really does. We're talking about transforming over 5,600 often neglected, sometimes barely functional rural libraries into these vibrant community hubs. The descriptions mention mural walls, comfy seating, computers, even Alexa devices.
5,600 libraries. That's incredible scale. And the results.
Pretty impressive metrics mentioned, something like 50 lakh children enrolled in library activities. And they've managed to increase library operating hours significantly, up to 8 hours a day in many places.
How did they manage that scale, that transformation? What was the key?
A key lesson highlighted was building it as a people's movement. Instead of relying solely on slow government funding processes, especially at the start, they focused on decentralization. They leveraged donations like getting computers from Dell Technologies and really empowered the local gram panchayats to take ownership and manage the libraries.
So local ownership was crucial, and the role of the library itself changed. It became more than just a place for books.
Much more. They've become multifunctional community centers, safe spaces, particularly for girls after school, study hubs for older students preparing for exams, meeting points for local group seniors, health workers like ASHAs, women's self-help groups.
And the tech aspect, like Alexa, the source had that interesting anecdote.
Oh, right. The child who preferred asking Alexa questions because, quote, the teacher might scold me, but Alexa never does that. It kind of speaks to the non-judgmental, welcoming atmosphere they've tried to create, a space for curiosity without fear.
And that welcoming space can bridge social divides too. The source mentioned a chess game.
Yes, a small but telling detail. A chess match happening between a tribal boy and a boy from a private school. The library becomes this neutral ground where kids from different backgrounds can interact, associate, maybe dream a little differently, away from the pressures or constraints of their homes.
It really shows how a seemingly simple space, a library, can become this vital catalyst for community building and individual aspiration.
Absolutely. A powerful example of grassroots transformation.
Okay, for our final piece, let's connect culture, geopolitics, and economics by looking at Moscow Fashion Week and the recent BRICS plus Fashion Summit held there.
Yeah, this is presented as more than just a fashion event. It's framed as a geopolitical indicator, a sign of shifting global influence. The context provided is important. The combined GDP of the BRICS plus nations, measured in purchasing power parity, has now actually edged slightly ahead of the G7 countries.
So the Fashion Summit is part of a larger push to, create alternative centers of influence.
Pretty much. The stated purpose is to create platforms for non-Western voices and perspectives, specifically trying to shift the fashion world's center of gravity away from the traditional capitals like Paris, Milan, London, New York. And this has become particularly relevant for Russia, of course, following Western sanctions.
A deliberate move to build soft power and economic ties outside the Western sphere. What about the fashion itself? What was shown?
Well, there's a contrast drawn. You had some established international designers presenting, like India's Shantanu Nikhil mentioned, with quite lavish collections, but the source emphasizes that the real pulse of young contemporary Russian fashion is quite different.
Different how?
It's described as rebellious, edgy, confident, heavily influenced by streetwear, but also drawing on various subcultures, Gothic, cyberpunk, Y2K, or 2000s aesthetics. Labels like Sol, Ermi, Zaza are mentioned as examples, playing with interesting textures, tailoring, and often oversized volumes.
So it's not just mimicking Western trends, but developing its own distinct style.
Exactly, a post-USSR identity finding expression in fashion. And the argument is that this isn't just happening in isolation. There's real potential for global impact here.
How so? Based on past influence.
Yes. The source points to the huge success of designers with roots in the former Soviet Union, most famously Demna Gvasalia, who has had massive influence at major luxury houses like Balenciaga and previously Gucci. His success demonstrates that designers from this region can shape global luxury trends.
So the implication is, if platforms like the BRICS plus Fashion Summit succeed in nurturing and promoting more talent like that,
Then Russia and the broader BRICS Plus bloc could gain significant cultural and economic influence in the fashion world, making it much harder for the traditional Western fashion establishment to ignore them. It's fashion reflecting and perhaps reinforcing those larger geopolitical shifts.
fascinating. We've certainly covered a lot of ground today, from mosquitoes being targeted from the inside out with ivermectin to that eye-watering $100,000 H-1B visa fee, and from revitalized village libraries in Karnataka to these geopolitical currents on the Moscow runways.
A real mix, definitely.
And maybe, if you look closely, there's a thread connecting many of these stories. It seems to be about decentralization, or maybe a challenge to centralized authority. You see it in disease control shifting focus with ivermectin, in Ladakh's push for decentralized power, even in the BRICS, plus attempt to decentralize cultural influence away from traditional centers.
That's an interesting lens, decentralization.
Yeah. So the thought to leave you with is, what happens when power, control, knowledge, even cultural capital start to move away or are actively pulled away from those long-established hubs? Whether it's global health bodies, national capitals, or fashion capitals, what does that redistribution mean for how things work, for who has influence, and for communities on the ground? Something to mull over.
It certainly raises profound questions about where we'll look for authority and innovation in science, politics, culture in the decades ahead.
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day